All right, so let's get right into it. Today, we're looking at a case that is so much more than just a true crime story. It's about a man whose horrific acts didn't just shock a country, they exposed these deep, systemic failures that completely shattered a nation's trust in the very institutions that are supposed to protect them. Take a look at this number, 300,000. On October 20th, 1996, that's how many people, in a country of just over 10 million, by the way, marched silently through the streets of Brussels. It was this massive, unprecedented demonstration that became known as the White March. And that, right there, is the central question of our whole explainer today. I mean, what on earth could happen that would cause hundreds of thousands of ordinary people to just pour into the streets, not for a celebration, but in this profound, silent protest, born of grief and pure anger? The answer? Well, it lies in the catastrophic mishandling of one of the darkest cases in modern European history. So that massive protest, that sea of people, it was a direct reaction to the story we're about to get into. It was really a roar of public outrage against a justice system that people felt had completely and utterly failed them. To understand that roar, we first have to understand the man at the very center of the storm. So you gotta ask, right? Who was this man, the one capable of causing this level of national trauma? His name was Marc Dutroux. And to really get why the public was so furious, we have to look past the headlines and see the man they thought was just, well, their neighbor. If you just look at his profile on paper, it's almost disturbingly ordinary. He was born in Brussels, spent some of his childhood in Africa, then came back to Belgium. He worked as an electrician, got married twice, had kids, but hiding behind this totally mundane facade was a history of abuse and a capacity for just unimaginable evil. And this is where things get truly chilling. His criminal history, it came in two distinct, terrifying waves. In 1989, he was convicted for abducting and raping 5 girls. Now, you would think that would be the end of it, but no. In 1996, he was arrested again, this time for abduction, torture, and murder. And that, right there, leads to the one question that just hangs over this entire case. And that's the question. That is what set an entire country on fire with anger. How is a man convicted of such horrible crimes back in '89 out on the streets, free to kill and torture again just a few years later? You see, this stopped being about one evil man. It became about a system that people believed had utterly failed. And if you want to see just how bad the failure was, you just have to look at these 3 dates. It's just shocking. 1989, he's convicted. But by 1992, he's granted parole after serving just 3 years. 3. And by 1996, he's back at it, arrested for a whole new reign of terror. That little gap, that short parole period, created a catastrophic hole in the justice system, one that would be paid for by his future victims. And listen, it wasn't just about him getting out early, as bad as that was. The source material is very clear that the police investigations that followed were just riddled with mistakes and shortcomings. So you have to understand, from the public's point of view, this wasn't one slip-up. It looked like a whole pattern of incompetence that allowed a monster to just roam free. Okay, so where did all this lead? How did this national nightmare finally end? And what was the lasting legacy? Not just for the people involved, but for the entire nation of Belgium. And here's something that's absolutely crucial to remember. Dutroux wasn't working alone. He had a network. His wife, Michelle Martin, got 30 years. An accomplice, Michel Leliev, got 25. Another accomplice was actually murdered by Dutroux himself before they could even get to trial. And then a fourth man was acquitted of the kidnappings, but convicted on other charges, which you can imagine just added another layer of doubt and suspicion for the public. It took until 2004. A full 8 years after he was arrested for the last time, but the verdict finally came down. Marc Dutroux was convicted on every single charge and sentenced to life in prison. And that, at least, closed the criminal chapter of this story, but its impact was far from over. But even with him behind bars, the story was far from over. The fallout from this was, well, it was immense. The case created this massive crisis of faith in the Belgian state. That White March became a permanent symbol of citizen power. And the impact was real. The public outcry became so loud that it literally forced the government to tear down and rebuild its entire law enforcement structure
all in an attempt to make sure a failure this catastrophic can never, ever happen again.
And that really brings us to the question that hangs in the air long after the trial is over. The Dutroux case isn't just about the evil one man can do. It's about how fragile our trust is in the systems we rely on. And when a system fails that spectacularly, when that bond of trust is just obliterated, how do you ever build it back?